This video is for my Algebra 2 students. I'm going to be doing lesson 62 on page 256 of your book. This lesson is kind of a continuation of an earlier lesson we did, lesson 51, with Euler's notation, and the video before that with completing the square. I'm going to bring them together and see how this works out, some things we alluded to earlier. It says to simplify, or to solve these, to solve for x in a problem like this. We're going to complete the square to do that. A couple things we learned about in completing the square. First of all, we only deal with terms that have an x in it, meaning we're going to get this 5 away from the other x terms. Second, we need to have them in proper order, in descending order. This 3x squared needs to be first. And we're going to put that 5 to the other side. So I've got 3x squared minus this x, minus 1x. The 5 goes over there and is equal to negative 5. Other thing we learned, third thing, whenever we complete the square, that coefficient of the x squared must be the number 1. So I'm going to divide by 3. I'm going to divide every term by 3 on both sides of the equation. This gives me x squared minus 1/3 x equals negative 5/3. When we complete the square, we take the coefficient of x. We take the 1/3. Don't worry about that negative. And I multiply it by 1/2. Usually I divide it by 2. But since this is a fraction, I'm going to multiply by 1/2 and square it. That gives me 1/6 squared. That gives me 1/36. That 1/36 gets added to both sides of the equation. Plus 1/36 plus 1/36. Over here, if we've done it right, and we have, this becomes a, what's that word? Perfect square trinomial. I guess that's not a word, that's a phrase. This factors into x minus something squared. What goes there? It's always the number that got squared. Is this plus or minus? I look at this term, it's minus. This 1/36, the thing you add, is always positive. This can be either positive or negative. So there it's minus 1/6 equals, and over here I have to combine negative 5/3 and 1/36. In order to do that, I must find a common denominator. My common denominator will be 36, so I'm going to multiply by 12 over 12. I get negative 60/36 plus 1/36. That gives me negative 59/36. X minus 1/6 squared equals negative 59/36. I take the square root of both sides. I get x minus 1/6 over here. That's easy. And I get the square root of negative 59 over the square root of 36, which is 6. I need to get this 1/6 over to the other side, so I add, oh, see what I forgot? I forgot my plus or minus. Plus or minus. Excuse me. I'm going to add 1/6 to both sides, so I get x equals 1/6 plus or minus the square root of negative 59 over 6. Now, the other day we learned about Euler's notation. Anytime we have a negative under the radical, we can erase that negative, because this is the, I'll put it here, this is just like the square root of 59 times the square root of negative 1. And we learned that the square root of negative 1 is I, so we get the square root of 59I. That happens right here also. Instead of this being negative 59, I'm going to make it 1/6, I'm squeezing in down here, plus or minus the square root of 59 over 6, and then I put an I out there beside it. Or as I like to do, I will often put the I right here next to the radical. Okay? Another one up there. In this original one, they had everything over on the left-hand side of the equation and equals 0. In this one, they've already put the constant. They put the term without an x already on the right-hand side. They've already done that for us. That's nice, great. But what they haven't done, though, is put them in correct order. So we need to have them in correct order first. 5x squared minus 2x equals negative 3. What else do I have to do? Do I take 2 and divide by 2 and square it? No, I must have my first term have a coefficient of 1. So that gives me, I've divided everything by 5, because it was 5x squared. And I've got x squared minus 2/5 x equals negative 3/5 x. Complete the square. Take 2/5, multiply it by 1/2, and square it. Now I'm going to show you, a lot of students make this, it's not a mistake, but they'll say that's 2/10 squared, which is 4/100. Well, that's all true, but we reduce where we can. The 2's cancel. 2/10 is the same as 1/5. I don't want to do 2/10 squared. I want to do 1/5 squared. 1/5 squared is 1/25. Well, guess what 4/100 is? It's also 1/25. If you had put 4/100, it wouldn't be wrong. It would just be improper. You need to reduce those fractions. So plus 1/25 goes on both sides of the equation. Don't forget that that's negative. This is now a perfect square trinomial. It will factor into x minus something squared. The 1/5 got squared. It is still minus, great. X minus 1/5 quantity squared equals. Up here, I have to combine these two, the negative 3/5 and the 1/25. I need a common denominator. 5 and 5. I've got negative 15/25 plus 1/25. That gives me negative 14/25. Kneel down here. Take the square root of both sides. X minus 1/5 equals the square root of negative 14 over the square root of 25, which is 5. Forgot my plus or minus again. Add 1/5 to both sides. This negative with the 14 comes out. You cannot take the square root of 14. By the way, if this had been the square root of 16, well, we would take a square root of negative 16. We would say, oh, that's 4i, because the square root of 16 is 4. And there's your final answer. Let me know if you have any trouble with this. Have fun. See you guys later.